Hello, dear friends. It's your buddy Isaac, and how are you today? Well, today I'm going to be talking and potentially ranting a little bit on some interesting information that I've come across or was brought to my attention by our good friend Treblowski. Now, there has been some interesting birdies whispering across Reddit that YouTube may soon be getting divested from Google. Why is that, you ask? Well, you see, not very long ago, and while this has been very quiet of late, Google has been found in violation of the Sherman Act, an anti monopoly law in the United States created back during the time of good old buddy Teddy Roosevelt to help bust up the big parties of the Great Gilded Age. Now, what does a Gilded Age law have anything to do with you, Google? Well, you see, Google is oftentimes put up as the default browser or the default search engine for a whole lot of everything. This, conducted in the eyes of the court, as they have been officially convicted of it, an unfair advantage in competition, meaning that even though other companies do exist, Google had created for itself an environment in which it had an unfair advantage on the market, where it could therefore control and corner the market and keep power over it to ensure that they had their way with it. Now, the Sherman Act, when somebody violates it, has a couple of things that happen. Obviously, you're going to get fined, you're going to have a sentencing stuff, that kind of thing going on. Another thing that usually happens, and I do say usually happens, is if a company is found to be in violation of the Sherman Act, that company is then broken up. All subsidiary corporations of said company are then divided and made into their own individual businesses to have no further ties or any kind of monetary, corporate, or otherwise business to do with the original company that they had been broken up with. Now, well, that being said, considering that YouTube is a subsidiary of Google, there have been plenty of little birdies talking potentially of YouTube being forcibly set free by good old Uncle Sam. That Google may soon lose control over their prize video sharing platform, something which in and of itself could arguably be in violation of the same reason that Google was in violation of the Sherman Act. As most often, YouTube is the default video sharing platform, so even though you have things like Rumble and X as competitors, YouTube technically has its own unfair advantage within video sharing and market in terms of content creation and distribution. Which means that, yes, even technically YouTube could be potentially put as violation of the Sherman Act under the legal principle set forth by Google's own conviction. Now, what this would mean for YouTube as a whole is that their company would no longer have access to any of Google's resources. YouTube would have to basically make their own system from the ground up. There would have to be a complete and total overhaul of not only the entire website and how it functions, but how the company itself reacts and functions around us. And the truth is, there are plenty of content creators who would be very overwhelmingly hopping for joy at this point. Because quite frankly, YouTube hasn't really been great to independent content creators. YouTube has, of late especially, had a bad issue where they've been issuing takedowns, copyright strikes, and just deleting channels left and right. And when genuinely asked why, well, the company refuses more often than not to even bother to give a decent explanation. In fact, it seems as long as YouTube has Google's money and resources at hand, they don't seem to have to feel like they have to actually concern themselves with how they actually treat the people who make content for their platform. I guess when you figure that you have the backing of a multi-billion-dollar company trying to actually deal with the people who make content for you that you don't seem to believe to be anything more than a bunch of college dropouts, probably not on your to-do list. But once Google actually is no longer in the picture, YouTube's gonna have to go right back to those same content creators. YouTube is going to have to essentially talk to these same people once more. And that means having to genuinely mend or try to fix a lot of the issues that they've caused in the last several decades, or in the last decade or so. It means a total revamp of the copyright system. It means having more transparency as to why they do things and why channels are being struck or being shadow banned or what have you. This is going to be a point where advertisers as well are going to have to end up being a less of a value to YouTube. Because YouTube's current issue as well has been a massive ad block war. An ad block war more than likely put into place in part by Google, trying to use as much money as they can. Because Google has, as their way of trying to monetize YouTube, thrives almost exclusively on ad campaigns and advertisers. Now, personally, I would say that's a big mistake, considering that YouTube, if anything, should really be run more or less like a media corporation or a media business, with content creators being independent studios. Part of that, I would argue, if Google really wanted to make money here, would be actually making content, or not making content, sorry, my brain is going haywire. Making merchandise, there we go. Making merchandise for channels once they hit a certain subscriber count. Once they start actually having X number of watch hours, X number of views, X number of subscribers. Basically, once the platform knows for a fact that your channel is popular enough to actually help make merchandise for you. To deal with something like, say, competition like Teespring, it would be a matter of offering a decent enough share to the creators where selling the product would be actually profitable, and especially if they can do it at even cheaper than what Teespring's willing to charge people. See, when it comes to media, especially old school film, believe it or not, a lot of the money that a movie makes is not going to be from the box office. Most of your money gets made more or less from merchandise. A lot of movies at the end of the day are really just glorified ads for lunchboxes and t-shirts. And weirdly enough, despite YouTube essentially having content creators that they could make money by actually making those t-shirts and lunchboxes, they would much rather force the creators to have their own merch made through separate companies. A pretty bad idea in my personal opinion. Moreover, a lot of content creators find it a massive headache. Because it's actually annoying, because can in fact be cases where maybe the company decides that they don't want to make the t-shirts and lunchboxes for that creator anymore. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe they're downsizing. Maybe they're moving. Who knows? But it creates a big old headache for the content creator in general. which for a lot of content creators, we tend to get onto this platform not because we're trying to get into the business side of things, but because we just like entertaining people. We like being goofballs on the internet that make people laugh and have a good time. So really, the smarter thing that Google and honestly YouTube could have done was basically take that business element out of our hands and made more than a little tidy profit while they were doing it. But that's not what they've done. If anything, some of the major issues that content creators have had, especially independent content creators have had with YouTube, is a big declaration of, well, quite frankly, favoritism. Corporate channels seem to be protected and seem to be allowed to do things that an average content creator would never even remotely be allowed to. Heck, even advertisers are allowed to essentially post and create videos that are, how should I say, bit on the more adult side of things. Meanwhile, any content creator that even dares so much as glance in that direction can look at their channel potentially being completely and utterly removed. Heck, it becomes even worse when you're talking about channels associated with individuals who are either doing direct business with Google or who have ties with the company in terms of family members or what have you. Even potentially alleged industry plants. YouTubers created fictionally by YouTube/Google themselves, whose entire job is to basically take advantage of people's interest in content creation. These scripted YouTubers who aren't really YouTubers at all are then essentially used to be able to siphon off views and subscribers from the channel. And even worse cases, these channels are pushed through the algorithm with unfair advantage. Meaning that channels like mine and others, like hell, even more popular channels that have been on the platform for a very long time, like Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, find themselves in a lot more difficult time just being able to keep their subscribers, or heck, even managing to get people to actually get notifications for videos that they put out. YouTube should be trying to celebrate these content creators, should be celebrating these people and trying to show them as a means of telling independent content creators that yes, you can in fact make it on this platform. But more often than not, that's not what we're seeing. YouTubers are finding it even more difficult over time. Starting a new channel is even harder nowadays than ever before. Getting your videos discovered, getting people to actually see it on this platform is pretty rough. And when you try to even talk to YouTube about this, well, they pretty much just blame you. They constantly say, oh, well, you just don't understand our discovery program. Oh, you don't understand this or understand that. However, even if you try to practice the things that they suggest in the page they provide for it, it still doesn't help. Worse still is the predatory industry that has popped up around it. An industry of individuals who sell themselves as quote-unquote channel promoters who on Fiverr will sell their services to promote your channel where they claim that they're trying to distribute it and show it to people and be able to put it on sites to get attention for the platform for your video. In reality, more often than not, these people actually send a crap load of bots. And once they're into the system and your channel's overloaded with bots, if you're a newer channel, well, you might as well be SOL. And YouTube has essentially, for lack of a better term, helped create this industry of scam artists. An industry built on essentially tricking young kids, and in fact, even anybody who is trying to start anything on this platform, hoping to actually build a channel or a community despite YouTube's best effort. And even worse is, due to some of the systems on the platform, it can even essentially be seen as YouTube actively going against that channel. Which, if YouTube isn't shadow banning people, well, it's not helping at all when you have very clear evidence of channels having a much harder time even getting through. And the sad part is that, hell, to be honest, some corporate channels aren't even immune to this. Take, for example, a channel that I enjoy watching, Gas Monkey Garage. Now, if you don't know these folks, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that, considering that Gas Monkey Garage actually used to be on primetime television. They were on the Discovery Channel for 20 years. Of course, you would probably better know them as the show Fast and Loud. Yep, those boys are on YouTube. And despite what should be millions and millions, potentially billions of people who know who they are because of their time on television, their channel only has a few million people on it. YouTube seems to have this very same issue on a consistent basis. Channels that you would think would be much more popular than they are seem to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, in a dead zone wasteland, so to speak. Meanwhile, channels that seem to pop out of nowhere, that seem to have direct corporate ties either to Google or YouTube itself, are miraculously gaining millions of subscribers almost overnight. Something which is very clear evidence of not only favoritism, but an unfair advantage on the platform as a whole. Independent content creators are forced to essentially struggle and fight and strive just to get a little bit of attention on the platform. Meanwhile, these corporate channels and effectively plants on the platform are just handed fame and glory. More importantly, even more recently, you have even other industries or even that involve themselves in video creation or streaming, such as VTubers, have found themselves increasingly under attack by both YouTube and, by extension, Twitch as well. Channels are being banned for no reason. Channels that are being run by people who actually work for the VTubers are also being banned or copyright struck without any part of YouTube actually trying to reach out to the VTuber. Or when that VTuber does try to reach out to them, they fight them tooth and nail to the point where lawyers have to get involved. Now, something I will absolutely say is that when this kind of stuff does happen, if your channel gets deleted and you've tried to go through the reasonable channels, you've tried to talk to YouTube, you've tried to show them where you haven't actually violated their terms of service, I am one of those guys that will absolutely tell you that yes, you should take them to court. Because terms of service goes both ways. It's a contract like any other. YouTube essentially agrees to not delete your channel so long as you don't commit illegal acts or you don't violate the various terms of the service they provide. However, what's becoming more and more common both on YouTube and other platforms is an interesting concept where they will straight up ban you, but not actually tell you what you've done. Not actually tell you what rules you've genuinely violated, or if you've even violated something at all. They'll make a very light claim saying that you violated the terms of service, but not actually expand on what part of the terms of service that you have actually violated. Which, in and of itself, If brought to a court, I would definitely believe that yes, that would not stand up in any court for any amount of reason. When it comes to legal cases, especially in something like this, you would actually have to provide evidence as to where that person actually violated the contract. But YouTube and several other different platforms have thus far been allowed to essentially monitor this on themselves. They've been allowed to basically just do whatever they want, prohibiting platforms and channels for various people essentially because they feel like it. This is all things that will have to change if YouTube does get separated from Google. There's no way that a YouTube that is no longer a subsidiary of Google is going to survive if this behavior continues to keep up. Content creators have very much at this point voiced that they are simply just sick and tired of it. They're tired of social media platforms essentially being able to just take away their entire livelihood on what is essentially a whim. They're tired of being worried about whether or not they're actually going to be able to make a living. And well, one friend of mine has at one point said, well, companies don't owe you to make a living. I would actually disagree with that for two reasons in particular. One, companies actually need people to be able to make a living in order to actually buy their goods, or to even buy in the case of YouTube, to buy the products of the advertisers that they are fighting so hard to protect. If people don't have money, they're not buying anything. More importantly, another aspect of why it's important to actually provide employees or people that you're working with a good living in a business sense is if people aren't making enough to make it worth their time to do something for you, whether it's making content or making a pencil, for crying out loud, eventually they're just not going to do it anymore. It's kind of human nature where if we're not getting something out of it, for us to essentially just decide to not do it any further. There's a point when our kindness and us just wanting to show our favoritism toward a specific topic, whether it's Warhammer, video games, you name it, kind of goes out the window, and a point where it eventually has to have some variety of reward. And if people are simply just not getting that reward, they're just simply not going to do it. If content creators find it so difficult to even make their platform on this website, whether YouTube, X, or what have you, eventually they're just going to leave. They're just not going to make content. Which means that YouTube itself will run into yet another problem. Content creators that have been on this platform that are massive may well decide to just leave, no longer getting anything out of the platform itself. Now, this could take in the form of them just deciding to quit in general, like Review Tech USA or MatPat did after selling his platform or channel off to a company. But this is something that can and does happen a lot, especially recently. YouTubers are burning out. They're getting tired of making content for no reason and getting no reward for it. And if YouTube no longer has content creators that are popular enough to draw people to the website, their website will die and they will lose any amount of market share that they have. Or potentially worse, those same content creators could simply go to a competitor, in which case YouTube not only loses the market share, but it actually increases the market share of their competitors. And when you're talking about a business, you have to be, especially a business that runs on selling ad space, You need people to be watching your platform. You need people to go to your website. That's kind of the whole thing. That's the major market of it all. If people are no longer going to your website because they're genuinely sick and tired of watching the same stuff over and over again, or the content creators that they had actually watched have left because it's no longer viable for them to make content on your platform, you've done goofed. You shot yourself in the foot. And YouTube seems to be determined, essentially, to do exactly that. Shoot themselves in the foot in the name of, well, honestly, corporate politics. It seems to be that a lot of these companies are doing this recently, too, where rather than actually trying to make money by genuinely doing the smart thing, they're more interested in playing buddy-buddy with, well, corporations that should technically be their rival. YouTube, for example, has been very protective and helpful to Disney, even though technically YouTube should see themselves in part as some variety of competition to Disney, being a distribution of media itself. However, they have gone out of their way to essentially protect the company and kind of give Disney free rein to do whatever they like. Something which honestly is not doing too as well as they thought. But hopefully we'll see this change. I hope personally that this will be something that changes if YouTube is separated from Google. Hopefully most of this is something that Google has been pushing YouTube to do, and the people at YouTube will eventually and hopefully smartly choose to go the exact opposite, realizing how much they actually need these content creators and how desperately it is needed to not tick off your customer base. But personally, of late, I'd argue that's a little something more than a lot of corporations have really managed to pull lately, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment if you did, and we'll see you next time.